They called me the quiet one. The sister who just existed. My dreams? Too small. My work? Just some computer thing. Then he arrived. The VIP. The one they couldn't wait to impress. They told me to stay out of sight. To not embarrass them. But what happens when the unimpressive daughter is the only one the VIP actually came to see? My name is Elara, and I spend my days looking for echoes of creation in the silent expanse of space. My small observatory, nestled on a hill just outside a town that prizes Friday night football over celestial mechanics, is my sanctuary. Each morning begins not with coffee, but with the hum of telescopes aligning, the quiet whir of data servers, and the breathtaking possibility that today, I might glimpse something no human eye has ever seen before. My work is in theoretical astrophysics, a field that often feels as distant and incomprehensible to others as the nebulae I study. Most people I meet, when they hear what I do, just nod slowly, their eyes glazing over, before changing the subject to something more terrestrial, like the weather or the price of gas. It's a solitary passion, but one that fills me with a profound sense of wonder, a connection to something infinitely larger than myself. I live a quiet life, my routine dictated by star charts and research papers. My apartment is modest, filled with more books than furniture, and my social interactions outside of academic conferences are minimal. I've never been one for grand pronouncements or drawing attention to myself. My colleagues know me as dedicated, perhaps a little obsessive, but always precise. In the grand tapestry of the cosmos I explore, individual human concerns can feel remarkably small, yet it's precisely this perspective that keeps me grounded, or so I thought. The universe she explores is vast and complex, much like the unspoken dynamics of her own family. Does Elara's quiet dedication remind you of someone whose depth is often overlooked? Share their story in the comments below. To my family, I've always been the enigma, the slightly peculiar younger sister who traded a promising, normal career path for what they perceive as a glorified, and decidedly unglamorous, hobby. My older brother, Marcus, is their North Star. He's charismatic, a successful tech entrepreneur whose latest app is always the talk of family dinners, his life a highlight reel of venture capital wins and exotic holidays. He's everything I'm not, outgoing, easily understood, and conventionally impressive. In their eyes, he orbits at the center of the family galaxy, while I'm a distant, dimly lit planet, occasionally acknowledged but rarely truly seen or understood for the light I might actually hold. Family gatherings are a master class in polite dismissal. Oh, Elara's here. Still looking at stars, are we, dear? My mother would chirp, her smile never quite reaching her eyes, before turning eagerly to Marcus to dissect his latest business triumph. My father, a man of few words but strong opinions, would usually offer a gruff, anything a normal person would understand, Elara? The relatives would follow suit, showering Marcus with praise for his new car or his brilliant investment strategies, while my latest published paper, the culmination of years of painstaking research into dark matter, would be met with a vacant stare or a swift change of topic. That's nice, dear, was the standard, a conversational full stop. I used to try, in the early days. I'd attempt to explain the beauty of a dying star, the intricate dance of galaxies, or the sheer intellectual thrill of solving a cosmic puzzle. But their blank expressions, the subtle shifts in posture indicating boredom, eventually taught me to keep my universe to myself. It was easier to nod along, to offer a faint smile, and retreat into the quiet corners of my mind where the equations made sense and the celestial bodies didn't require validation. My achievements, significant in my world, were just peculiar footnotes in theirs, if they were even registered at all. They didn't mean to be unkind, I think. They simply didn't have the framework to appreciate what they couldn't easily quantify or boast about. So, I poured myself into my work, finding solace and a sense of purpose in the vast, indifferent beauty of the cosmos. My observatory became more than a workplace, it was a refuge, a place where my intellect was valued, where My contributions mattered. The silence of the night, punctuated only by the mechanical hum of my equipment, was a comforting symphony compared to the often jarring dissonance of family expectations. I learned to compartmentalize, to be Dr. Elara Vance, respected astrophysicist. Within the hallowed, albeit dusty, halls of academia, and just Elara, Marcus's quiet sister, when I crossed the threshold of my parents' home. It was a delicate balance, a dual existence I navigated with practiced ease, or so I believed. The unspoken truth was that a part of me, a small, persistent flicker, still yearned for a different kind of recognition from them. Not applause or adulation, but just a simple acknowledgement, a spark of genuine interest in the world that captivated me so completely. I'd tell myself it didn't matter, that their approval was irrelevant to the immutable laws of physics. I studied. Yet, the human heart, even one dedicated to the stars, has its own gravitational pulls, its own need for connection and understanding from those it considers its origin. But this longing remained a closely guarded secret, buried deep beneath layers of academic jargon and stoic professionalism. Recently, the annual family summons arrived, an embossed invitation to my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. A milestone, a mandatory gathering of the clan. Marcus, of course, was flying in his new, highly accomplished girlfriend, a corporate lawyer named Serena, whom my mother had been gushing about for weeks. She's so polished, Elara, so articulate. You'll see, Mom had enthused over the phone. The unspoken comparison hanging heavy in the air. I'd already mentally prepared myself for the usual routine, navigate the small talk, endure the subtle digs, and try to fade into the background as gracefully as possible while Marcus and Serena held court. I had even booked a new, albeit simple, dress for the occasion, a small concession to their world. I marked the date on my calendar, a faint circle around a day I anticipated with a familiar blend of duty and a quiet, almost imperceptible dread. I planned my travel, arranged for a colleague to cover my observation schedules, and even rehearsed a few neutral conversation starters that wouldn't involve stellar nucleosynthesis. I told myself it would be fine, just another family event to endure before I could retreat back to the comforting certainty of my celestial charts and the silent, non-judgmental company of the stars. Little did I know this particular gathering wasn't just going to be another exercise in familial invisibility. The phone call came a week before the party. It was my father. His voice, usually so direct, had an unfamiliar edge, a hesitancy that immediately set my internal alarms ringing. Elara, he began, clearing his throat, about Mom's anniversary party. Marcus is bringing Serena, you know. She's from a very influential family, and this is her first time meeting everyone. We want everything to be perfect. I waited, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. I knew, with a sinking certainty, that this preamble wasn't leading to a request for my famous, amongst my 3 closest colleagues, at least, Kuiper belt-themed cookies. He continued, the words carefully chosen, but each one landing like a tiny shard of ice. Look, your work, it's very specialized, isn't it? Not exactly cocktail party conversation. And Marcus mentioned Serena's father is a big name in aerospace, a very serious man. We just think, perhaps it would be best if you toned it down a bit. Or maybe, if you're very busy, you could just send your good wishes. The implication was clear, as sharp and defined as a constellation on a moonless night. My presence, my very essence, was a potential embarrassment, a variable that might disrupt their carefully curated image of a perfect, successful family. The silence that followed stretched across the phone line, heavy and suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat thrumming in my ears, a frantic counterpoint to the sudden, chilling stillness that had enveloped me. So, you're saying, I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper, that you'd prefer I didn't come? Because my profession isn't impressive enough for Serena's father? He didn't deny it. There was just a sigh, a sound of weary resignation. As if I were the one being difficult. Elara, don't be dramatic. We just want a smooth evening. For Marcus. For your mother. The unspoken words, "Not for you," echoed louder than anything he'd actually said. My father's words, "We just want a smooth evening." For Marcus. For your mother, hung in the air, a stark reminder of my perennial place on the periphery of their concern. It wasn't malice, I tried to tell myself. It was a deeply ingrained pattern, a familial orbit where I was simply a less significant celestial body. But this time, the casual dismissal cut deeper than usual. It wasn't just about my work being misunderstood. It was about me being a potential social liability, an inconvenient truth in their quest for a picture-perfect family tableau designed to impress a stranger. The line went quiet after his last remark, not with a click of him hanging up, but with the weight of his expectation that I would simply acquiesce, as I always had. I remember standing there in my observatory, the faint glow of a distant galaxy cluster painting ethereal patterns on the monitor beside me. These vast, cosmic structures, born from eons of gravitational ballet, suddenly felt less complex than the intricate, unspoken rules of my own family. For years, I had quietly absorbed the slights, the unintentional, and sometimes, I suspected, intentional, condescension. I'd built a fortress around my professional life, a place where my worth was measured by intellect and discovery, not by my ability to make light conversation or impress my brother's latest romantic interest. But this direct request to effectively erase myself from an important family event, to dim my own light so theirs could shine brighter on someone else, felt like a fundamental betrayal. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that precedes a seismic shift. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue. What was the point? Their perspective was as fixed as the North Star. Instead, I heard myself say, my tone devoid of emotion, "I understand, Dad. I wouldn't want to cause any awkwardness. I'll be very busy that weekend. Please give Mom my love and tell her I wish her a happy anniversary." He seemed relieved, the tension in his voice instantly dissipating. "Good, Elara. That's sensible. She'll understand. You know how these things are." And just like that, I was edited out of the family narrative, a deleted scene deemed unnecessary for the final cut. After the call, I didn't immediately plunge into work. I walked through the quiet observatory, the scent of old books and electronics. A familiar comfort. My gaze fell upon a framed photograph on my cluttered desk, a rare one of me and Marcus as children, genuinely smiling, before the invisible lines of familial expectation had been so clearly drawn. A pang of an old, familiar ache resonated within me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a new, steely resolve. If my own family considered my very being, my life's passion, a source of potential embarrassment, then perhaps it was time to reevaluate the energy I invested in seeking their validation. For years, I had been the silent, reliable support system. Not just emotionally, but financially, in ways they likely never fully registered or perhaps chose to ignore. When Marcus's first startup had teetered on the brink of collapse, it was my unimpressive savings, painstakingly accumulated from research grants and stipends, that had provided the quiet, unacknowledged bailout. When my parents' ancient boiler had finally given up the ghost in the dead of winter, a significant anonymous gift had appeared in their bank account, ensuring their comfort. I never asked for thanks, never mentioned it. It was simply what one did, or so I believed, for family. These contributions were my quiet way of participating, of maturing, even if my presence wasn't always celebrated. The anniversary party approached. I received no further calls from my parents or Marcus, no awkward attempts to smooth things over or even a perfunctory check-in. It was as if my quiet agreement to be absent had solved all their problems. I imagined them bustling with preparations, selecting outfits, planning menus, all with the single-minded focus of presenting a flawless facade to Serena and her influential family. The thought no longer stung with the same intensity. Instead, a curious detachment had taken root, a sense of observing their world from a great, almost astronomical, distance. My universe, the one filled with cosmic wonders and intellectual challenges, suddenly felt more real, more substantial, than theirs. On the day of the party, I found myself not at my telescope, but at my home computer, a different kind of calculation running through my mind. I logged into my online banking portal, a place I usually visited only to manage research budgets or pay my own modest bills. I pulled up the transaction history, the lines of debits and credits painting a stark, undeniable picture. The anonymous boiler replacement. The unexpected windfall that had covered Marcus's debts. The regular, smaller sums I'd transferred over the years, disguised as birthday gifts or just because funds, to ease my mother's anxieties about their retirement fund. The total was significant. Far more than I had consciously tracked. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about the profound, echoing silence that had always accompanied these gestures. No questions asked, no gratitude expressed beyond a polite, "Oh, that's lovely, dear," if they even connected it to me. It was taken, absorbed, and forgotten, much like my presence at family gatherings. I stared at the screen, not with anger, but with a chilling clarity. I had been a convenient, invisible resource, a safety net they barely knew existed but relied upon nonetheless. And now, the one time I might have inadvertently inconvenienced them with my mere, unremarkable existence, I was deemed expendable. A new window was open on my screen, the university's internal portal for research funding. Applications. A prestigious international grant, one I had been hesitating to apply for due to its demanding requirements and the extensive travel it would necessitate, suddenly seemed not just appealing, but imperative. It was an opportunity to immerse myself completely in my work, to collaborate with the brightest minds in my field, to be in an environment where my passion wasn't just tolerated, but celebrated. The deadline was looming, and the application was complex. It would require all my focus, all my energy. I began to type, the words flowing with an ease and conviction I hadn't felt in a long time. The complexities of galactic dynamics, the mysteries of cosmic rays, the search for habitable exoplanets, these were the narratives that truly mattered to me. As I detailed my research proposals, a sense of liberation washed over me. I was no longer just Elara, Marcus's quiet sister. I was Dr. Elara Vance, on the cusp of potentially groundbreaking work. The anniversary party, with its carefully constructed illusions and unspoken hierarchies, faded into the background, a distant, insignificant star in my rapidly expanding universe. The choice to step away from their stage was becoming my own. But the chapter most surprising in her journey was yet to unfold, locked away like a celestial secret. Continue watching to uncover the full truth behind decades of quiet endurance. The decision to apply for the grant, to pour my energy into my own aspirations rather than pining for familial acceptance, felt like a crucial turning point. The days leading up to what would have been the anniversary party were filled with intense focus. I barely left the observatory, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the sheer exhilaration of shaping my research proposal. The intricate mathematics, the complex theories, they were a comforting, logical embrace compared to the messy, unpredictable dynamics of human relationships. My colleagues noticed the change, a new intensity in my demeanor. Dr. Albright, my mentor and a man who communicated more effectively through equations than words, even offered a rare, "Good to see you so energized, Vance. Big things ahead, I trust." As I worked, my phone remained largely silent. No last-minute guilt trips from my mother, no awkward follow-up from my father, not even a cursory text from Marcus. It was as if my polite withdrawal had been exactly what they wanted, a seamless excision that left no scars on their perfect family picture. A part of me wondered if they even remembered I wasn't going to be there, or if my absence was just another detail that blended into the background noise of their preparations. The thought, which once would have caused a dull ache, now just brought a sigh of resignation. I was charting a new course, and their gravitational pull was weakening with every passing hour. The evening of the anniversary party arrived. I was in my small apartment, surrounded by stacks of research papers and the faint scent of old starlight clinging to my clothes from the observatory. I didn't feel a shred of regret, no longing to be amidst the clinking glasses and forced pleasantries. Instead, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I had chosen my own celebration, a celebration of intellect, of discovery, of a future I was actively shaping for myself. I made myself a simple dinner, put on some classical music, and reviewed the final draft of my grant application. It felt more significant, more real, than any social gathering could ever be. Around 9 o'clock, just as I was about to hit submit on the application, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Elara? Is that you? The voice was reedy, unfamiliar, laced with a strange urgency. This is Arthur. Arthur Pendleton. Serena's father. My breath caught in my throat. Serena's father? The very man whose esteemed presence had apparently rendered me too gauche for my own family's celebration. Why on earth was he calling me? My mind raced, trying to anticipate what could possibly be coming. Had something happened at the party? Had Serena mentioned my absence, prompting this bizarre call? Mr. Pendleton, I managed, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. Yes, this is Elara Vance. To what do I owe the call? There was a pause, and I could hear the indistinct murmur of voices in the background. It sounded like a party, a strained one. Yes, well, Elara. Dr. Vance. I should say. Serena has mentioned your work. Theoretical astrophysics, isn't it? Fascinating field. My company, Pendleton Aerospace, we're always looking for innovative thinkers. My confusion deepened. This was surreal. He was at my parents' anniversary party, a party I was essentially uninvited from, and he was calling me to talk about my work? He continued, his voice a little louder now, as if he'd stepped away from the noise. Look, Dr. Vance, I know this is out of the blue, but I happened to see your name on a preliminary list for the International Astrophysics Fellowship. The one funded by the Global Science Initiative? My foundation is a major contributor to that initiative. Your preliminary proposal abstract was remarkably insightful. Particularly your work on alternative dark matter models. I was stunned into silence. He knew about my application? He'd read my abstract? The very work my family dismissed as looking at stars was not only understood but apparently respected by the titan of industry they were so desperate to impress. I was actually hoping to meet you tonight, Mr. Pendleton said, a note of genuine disappointment in his voice. Serena mentioned you were Marcus's sister and would be here. I find it's always better to put a face to a brilliant mind. When I asked your father where you were, he seemed rather vague. Said you were terribly busy with some academic thing, thought. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. My father, in his attempt to shield this very serious man from my supposedly unpresentable self, had inadvertently piqued his interest. The universe, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. If this story is making you think about the surprising ways talent can be recognized, even when hidden, hit that like button. Let's see how many of us believe in unexpected breakthroughs. I took a slow breath, the pieces of this bizarre cosmic joke clicking into place. Yes, Mr. Pendleton, I said, a newfound confidence infusing my voice. I was unfortunately unable to attend this evening. But I would be delighted to discuss my research with you at a more convenient time. Perhaps after the fellowship finalists are announced? There was a hearty chuckle on the other end. Finalists? Dr. Vance, with a proposal like yours, I'd say you're a shoo-in. Consider this an early expression of interest from Pendleton Aerospace. We might have some collaborative projects that would greatly benefit from your unique perspective. He went on to talk for another 10 minutes, asking intelligent, informed questions about my research, his enthusiasm palpable. He spoke of potential funding, of access to new observational data, of opportunities that made my academic heart beat faster. It was the kind of conversation I had always dreamed of having, but never with someone connected, however tangentially, to my family's social posturing. And certainly not as a direct consequence of their attempt to sideline me. The absurdity of it all was almost overwhelming. When the call finally ended, I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, the grant application still glowing on my screen. Mr. Pendleton's words echoed in my mind, "Your unique perspective." The very thing my family found perplexing, even embarrassing, was what a leader in the aerospace industry considered valuable. I looked at the submit button. This application wasn't just about securing funding anymore. It was about stepping fully into my own light, regardless of who else was comfortable with its brightness. With a steady hand, I clicked submit. A small confirmation window popped up, application received. A wave of profound relief and a burgeoning sense of excitement washed over me. I had no idea what the future held, what this unexpected call from Arthur Pendleton might lead to, or how my family would react when, or if, they ever found out. But one thing was certain, I was no longer content to be a dimly lit planet in anyone else's orbit. I was ready to chart my own course, towards my own discoveries, under my own terms. The stars, it seemed, were finally aligning in my favor. The following week was a blur of academic duties and a quiet, simmering anticipation. I didn't mention Mr. Pendleton's call to anyone. It felt like a secret treasure, a private validation that was mine alone. I wondered if he had said anything to my parents or Marcus after our conversation, but I received no calls, no inquiries. It was as if the anniversary party had happened in a separate dimension, one where I simply didn't exist, and its ripples hadn't reached my shore. Or perhaps, they were too embarrassed to admit their guest of honor had sought out the very daughter they had deemed unfit for his company. The silence from my family continued, stretching into a comfortable, almost liberating, void. I found myself less preoccupied with their opinions, or lack thereof, than ever before. My days were filled with teaching, research, and the quiet hum of the observatory, a rhythm that felt more authentic and fulfilling than any family gathering ever had. The conversation with Arthur Pendleton had lit a spark, not just of ambition, but of self-assurance. His recognition, coming from such an unexpected quarter, felt like a cosmic wink, a sign that I was on the right path, even if it diverged sharply from the one my family envisioned for me. About 2 weeks after the anniversary party, an official-looking email landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "Global Science Initiative, Fellowship Update." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. I took a deep breath and clicked it open. The first few lines were standard boilerplate, but then, there it was, "We are delighted to inform you that your proposal, Alternative Dark Matter Signatures in Dwarf Spheroidal Galaxies, has been selected for the International Astrophysics Fellowship." I read the sentence again, and then a third time, the words blurring slightly. I had one. The grant, the travel, the collaboration with leading researchers, it was all happening. A joyous, almost giddy laugh escaped me. I leaned back in my chair, a wide grin spreading across my face. This wasn't just a professional victory. It felt like a personal affirmation, a testament to the years of quiet dedication, the late nights, the sacrifices. It was a future I had built for myself, brick by painstaking brick, equation by complex equation. For the first time in a long time, I felt an unshakable sense of my own worth, independent of anyone else's validation. The universe I studied was vast and often indifferent, but in this moment, it felt like it was cheering me on. The fellowship required an initial orientation and planning session in Geneva in a month's time. Travel arrangements, accommodation details, it was all very official, very real. As I began to make preparations, I knew I would eventually have to inform my family. Not for their approval, but as a matter of courtesy, a simple update on my life. The thought no longer filled me with anxiety, but with a calm resolve. Their reaction, whatever it might be, wouldn't diminish my achievement. The old Elara might have rehearsed the conversation, carefully choosing her words to minimize their potential discomfort. The new Elara decided she would simply state the facts. I decided to call my mother first. When she answered, her voice was its usual breezy, slightly distracted self. "Elara, dear. So lovely to hear from you. Everything all right? You've been so quiet." I smiled faintly. "Everything's wonderful, Mom. I wanted to let you know I've been awarded the International Astrophysics Fellowship. It means I'll be spending some time in Geneva next month, and then there will be some travel for research collaborations over the next year." There was a pause. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "Geneva? That's nice. For your stars, is it?" The familiar dismissal, the subtle downplaying. But this time, it didn't sting. "Yes, Mom," I replied, my tone even. "It's a significant opportunity for my research. Quite prestigious, actually." I could almost hear her trying to process this, to fit it into her established narrative of my peculiar career. "Well, that's good for you, dear. I suppose Marcus will be thrilled. He's just closed a huge deal, you know, for his new app. They're talking about a feature in Forbes." The swift pivot back to Marcus, the immediate comparison. It was almost comical. The gravitational pull of the family's favored son was, it seemed, inescapable. I didn't rise to the bait. "That's great news for Marcus," I said genuinely. "Anyway, I just wanted to let you know about my plans." Before she could steer the conversation further into Marcus's achievements, I added, "Actually, the fellowship is partly funded by a foundation connected to Arthur Pendleton, Serena's father. He was very supportive of my application." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the gears whirring in her head. "Arthur Pendleton," she finally stammered. You know Arthur Pendleton? We spoke a few weeks ago," I said calmly. "He called me. He's quite interested in my research on dark matter." The silence stretched longer this time, thick with unspoken questions and, I suspected, a dawning realization. "He called you," she repeated, her voice a mixture of disbelief and something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it awe? Or perhaps a touch of embarrassment? "Well, isn't that something?" she eventually managed, her usual effusiveness completely gone. The dynamic of the conversation had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. "Do you believe a moment of external validation can change how your loved ones see you? If you've witnessed something like this, share your experience in the comments. Sometimes it takes an outsider to open insiders' eyes." The rest of the call was brief. My mother seemed flustered, making vague promises to tell my father and Marcus my exciting news. I hung up, a small, wry smile playing on my lips. It wasn't vindication I felt, not exactly. It was more a sense of quiet amusement at the universe's intricate, often ironic, workings. My father's attempt to shield Mr. Pendleton from my unimpressive self had not only failed but had backfired in a way he could never have anticipated. The serious man they so revered had sought out the very daughter they had deemed a potential embarrassment. News, it seemed, traveled fast in my family when it involved someone of Mr. Pendleton's stature. Later that evening, my phone rang again. It was Marcus. His tone was uncharacteristically subdued. "Elara? Mom told me about your fellowship. And that you've been talking to Arthur Pendleton?" There was a note of incredulity in his voice, the kind he usually reserved for when I tried to explain quantum entanglement. "Yes, Marcus," I replied, keeping my voice light. "It's a fantastic opportunity." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Pendleton is a huge deal, Elara. His company is legendary. Serena's been trying to get me a proper meeting with him for months." The unspoken subtext was clear. How had I, the quiet, academic sister, managed to connect with such an influential figure when he, the savvy entrepreneur, hadn't? He's very interested in the practical applications of astrophysical research, I offered, not feeling the need to elaborate on the full story of our first contact. Let them wonder. The conversation was stilted, awkward. Marcus, usually so glib and confident, seemed at a loss for words. He mumbled something about being happy for me, then quickly changed the subject to his own recent successes, as if to reassert his place in the familial hierarchy. It was a familiar dance, but this time, I wasn't playing my usual part. I listened politely, offered a few cursory congratulations, and then ended the call. I had research to do, a trip to Geneva to plan. My universe was expanding, and I was no longer content to orbit silently in theirs. The groundwork was laid for a new dynamic, though I suspected the old patterns wouldn't disappear overnight. The trip to Geneva was everything I had hoped for and more. The city itself was a beautiful blend of old-world charm and modern innovation, much like the field of astrophysics itself. The orientation sessions for the fellowship were invigorating, surrounded by brilliant, passionate individuals from around A_indeed the globe, all dedicated to unraveling the universe's deepest secrets. For the first time, I felt completely and utterly in my element, my ideas not just understood but actively challenged and refined by peers who spoke my language. There were no blank stares here, no polite dismissals, just fervent debate, collaborative energy, and a shared awe for the cosmos. During one of the networking receptions, a distinguished, silver-haired gentleman approached me. "Dr. Vance? Arthur Pendleton. A genuine pleasure to finally meet you in person." He extended a hand, his smile warm and genuine. We spoke for over an hour, delving deeper into my research, his questions insightful and his interest palpable. He wasn't just a benefactor. He was a true enthusiast, someone who understood the profound implications of fundamental research, even if his own world was one of corporate boardrooms and aerospace engineering. He mentioned, almost casually, that he'd had a rather illuminating conversation with my father after our initial phone call, though he didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. The weeks in Geneva flew by. I immersed myself in workshops, attended lectures by Nobel laureates, and began to forge collaborations that promised exciting new avenues for my research. My family remained distant, both physically and emotionally. There were a few perfunctory texts from my mother, mostly filled with updates about Marcus or vague complaints about the weather. My father didn't call at all. It was as if my success, particularly its connection to someone like Arthur Pendleton, had created an awkwardness they didn't know how to navigate. Or perhaps, they were simply waiting for me to return to my designated, less conspicuous, place in the family orbit. When I returned home, filled with new ideas and a renewed sense of purpose, the atmosphere was strange. My parents insisted on a welcome-back dinner. It was a stilted affair. My father was unusually quiet, occasionally glancing at me with an unreadable expression. My mother fluttered around, making overly bright conversation about everything but my fellowship or Mr. Pendleton. Marcus, who was also present, seemed almost resentful, his usual easygoing charm replaced by a brooding silence. He'd make occasional pointed remarks about the ivory tower of academia, clearly trying to reassert his own real-world superiority. The elephant in the room, of course, was Arthur Pendleton. Finally, over dessert, my father cleared his throat. "So, Elara," he began, his voice gruff, "this Mr. Pendleton. He seems quite taken with your stargazing." The condescension was still there, but it was laced with a new, undeniable note of curiosity, perhaps even a grudging respect. "He's a visionary, Dad," I replied calmly. "He understands the importance of fundamental research and its potential to drive innovation, even in industries like aerospace." "Indeed," my father mused, steepling his fingers. He mentioned something about potential consulting work for Pendleton Aerospace? My mother's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Marcus actually choked on his coffee. Consulting? Marcus sputtered. For Pendleton Aerospace? Elara, are you serious? The disbelief in his voice was almost comical. This was the kind of opportunity he coveted, the kind of connection he prided himself on making. The idea that I, his quiet, unimpressive sister, had stumbled into it, apparently without even trying, was clearly galling to him. I simply nodded. We've had some preliminary discussions, I said, deliberately understating the extent of Mr. Pendleton's interest. My work on dark matter detection has some intriguing overlaps with sensor technologies they're developing for deep space missions. The room fell silent. The carefully constructed hierarchy of the Vance family, where Marcus was the undisputed star and I was the distant, irrelevant planet, had just been visibly shaken. My mother looked from me to my father, then to Marcus, her expression a mixture of confusion and a dawning, almost fearful, respect. It's amazing how one unexpected connection can shift the entire dynamic of a family. If you've seen how quickly perceptions can change, why not subscribe to see more stories about life's surprising turns? We've all got tales of underdogs and unexpected triumphs. The rest of the dinner was a blur of strained pleasantries and unspoken tensions. Marcus tried to steer the conversation back to his own achievements, but his words lacked their usual confident ring. My father asked a few more cautious questions about Mr. Pendleton, his tone now tinged with a deference I had never heard from him before when discussing my work. My mother just kept looking at me with wide, almost bewildered eyes, as if seeing me for the first time. It wasn't the warm, loving acceptance I had once craved, but it was something. A crack in the wall of their preconceived notions. As I drove back to my quiet apartment that night, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. There was a quiet satisfaction, yes, but also a touch of sadness. Sadness for the years lost, for the potential for genuine connection that had been squandered because of their narrow definitions of success. But overriding it all was a sense of peace. I no longer needed their approval to feel whole. My worth wasn't determined by their ability to understand or appreciate my path. I had my work, my passion, and a future filled with exciting possibilities. A future I was building on my own terms, under the vast, silent, and utterly impartial gaze of the stars. The following months saw a subtle but undeniable shift. My parents started asking more questions about my work, still fumbling with the terminology, but with a newfound, albeit hesitant, interest. Marcus was more distant, perhaps still smarting from the Pendleton revelation, but his digs became less frequent, his dismissals less absolute. The consulting work with Pendleton Aerospace began to take shape, leading to fascinating new research avenues and, yes, a rather substantial increase in my income, a fact that did not go unnoticed by my family, though I never flaunted it. The true test, however, came when my mother called me one afternoon, her voice tight with anxiety. "Elara, dear, it's your father. He hasn't been feeling well. The doctors are saying it might be serious. They want to run some very expensive tests, and Marcus is a bit overextended at the moment with his new venture." The unspoken plea hung heavy in the air. For years, I had been the silent, anonymous provider in times of need. Now, they were asking openly. And for the first time, I knew I had a choice, a real choice, not just an obligation. The news about my father's health, and my mother's subsequent, thinly veiled request for financial assistance, landed with a complicated thud. The old Elara would have immediately sprung into action, transferring funds without a second thought, her sense of duty overriding any personal feelings. But this was the new Elara, the one who had tasted genuine respect, who had begun to understand her own value beyond her utility to her family. I felt concern for my father, of course, a natural filial worry. But mixed with it was a clear-eyed awareness of the patterns of the past. "I'm sorry to hear Dad isn't well, Mom," I said, my voice calm and steady. "What exactly are the doctors saying?" She launched into a detailed, slightly panicked explanation of symptoms, specialist referrals, and the daunting projected costs of the diagnostic procedures. Marcus, she reiterated, was under a lot of pressure and couldn't really help out right now. The implication was clear: the responsibility, once again, was being subtly shifted onto my shoulders. The silent benefactor was being called upon to perform. Instead of immediately offering to cover everything, I paused. That does sound serious. Mom, I agreed. And of course, Dad needs the best care. Let me think about the best way I can help. I have some significant commitments with the fellowship and the Pendleton project right now, but I'll see what's feasible. Her silence on the other end was telling. It wasn't the instant, unquestioning compliance she was used to. Oh, she said. A note of surprise, perhaps even affront, in her voice. Well, the bills are rather urgent, dear. I understand that, Mom, I replied. And I will help. But we also need to consider a sustainable plan. Perhaps it's time we all sat down, you, Dad, me, and Marcus, and had an open conversation about family finances and future care. Relying on ad hoc solutions isn't fair to anyone in the long run. This was a radical departure from my previous modus operandi. I had never before suggested such a meeting, never dared to imply that the burden should be shared, or that their financial planning, or lack thereof, was a collective concern. The suggestion was met with sputtering resistance. A family meeting? Oh, I don't think your father is up to that right now, Elara. And Marcus is so busy. The excuses were predictable. The truth was, they weren't used to transparency, especially when it came to finances, and certainly not when it involved me taking an assertive, almost managerial, role. They were comfortable with my silent, invisible support, not with my active participation in decision-making. Despite their initial reluctance, the seriousness of my father's condition, and perhaps a dawning realization that I was no longer a pushover, eventually led them to agree to a conversation. The family meeting took place a few days later. At my parents' house. It was an awkward, tense affair. My father, looking paler and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him, sat quietly while my mother did most of the talking, reiterating the medical expenses. Marcus arrived late, looking harried and defensive, immediately launching into a spiel about his cash flow issues and the immense pressures of his latest venture. When they finally turned to me, expecting, I suppose, a quiet promise to write a check, I laid out my proposal. I am prepared to cover the full cost of Dad's immediate diagnostic tests and any urgent treatment required, I began, seeing a flicker of relief in my mother's eyes. However, I continued, my gaze steady. I believe it's time we address the long-term financial health of this family more formally. I propose we establish a dedicated family trust for future medical and living expenses. I am willing to make a substantial initial contribution and regular ongoing contributions. But Marcus, you will also need to contribute a proportionate amount once your current venture stabilizes. And we need to appoint an independent financial advisor to manage it, to ensure transparency and fair distribution. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus looked aghast, as if I'd suggested he donate a kidney. A trust? Proportional contributions? Elara, you can't be serious. You're the one with the Pendleton money now. My business is volatile, I can't commit to fixed amounts. My mother wrung her hands. Oh, Elara, dear, isn't that a bit complicated? We've always just managed. My father, however, surprised me. He looked at me, a long, searching gaze, and then slowly nodded. She's right, he said, his voice raspy but firm. It's time we stopped drifting. Elara's proposal is sensible. Marcus argued, protested, and tried to deflect, but with my father's unexpected backing, and my own unwavering stance, the tide had turned. It was a difficult, emotionally charged discussion, with old resentments and unspoken grievances bubbling to the surface. But for the first time, we were talking, truly talking, about uncomfortable realities, rather than sweeping them under the rug or relying on my silent intervention. It wasn't just about money, it was about respect, responsibility, and a reevaluation of roles within the family. This entire ordeal has been a testament to how speaking up can change dynamics. If you find Elara's courage to set boundaries inspiring, make sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on more stories of personal growth and transformation. In the end, a reluctant agreement was reached. I would cover the immediate costs, and we would begin the process of setting up a trust, with clear, albeit flexible, commitments from both Marcus and myself. It was a victory, not just for financial prudence, but for my own sense of self. I had asserted my boundaries, demanded accountability, and refused to revert to my old role as the family's unacknowledged safety net. I had helped, yes, but on my terms, as an equal partner, not as a silent subordinate. My father's medical tests, thankfully, revealed a condition that was serious but manageable with treatment and lifestyle changes. The financial strain was alleviated, not just by my contribution, but by the framework we had begun to build for the future. The dynamic within the family didn't magically transform overnight. Marcus remained somewhat resentful, my mother often lapsed into her old habits of deferring to him, and my father, while more respectful, still struggled to fully comprehend my world. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer the invisible daughter, the peculiar sister. I was Elara, a respected astrophysicist, a valued collaborator with Pendleton Aerospace, and now, a proactive, assertive member of my own family, capable of setting boundaries and demanding respect. The stars I studied were distant and ancient, their light traveling eons to reach us. Perhaps, I mused, the light of understanding within families also sometimes takes a very, very long time to arrive, but when it finally does, it can illuminate everything. My journey wasn't about seeking revenge or proving them wrong. It was about finding my own voice and learning to use it, even, and especially, with the people who were supposed to know me best. Life settled into a new rhythm after the family finance summit, and my father's subsequent recovery. The interactions with my family, while still occasionally tinged with the echoes of old dynamics, had a new undercurrent of respect, or at least, a grudging acknowledgement of my autonomy. My contributions to the family trust were made regularly and transparently, as were Marcus's, albeit sometimes with a bit more grumbling on his part. The independent financial advisor we appointed brought a level of neutrality and professionalism that had been sorely lacking. It wasn't a perfect system, but it was a functioning one, built on clearer expectations and shared responsibility. My work with Pendleton Aerospace blossomed. The initial consulting evolved into a more formal research partnership, allowing me access to cutting-edge technology and data that significantly advanced my astrophysical models. Arthur Pendleton became not just a benefactor or a colleague, but a genuine mentor and friend. He never once pried into my family affairs, but his unwavering professional respect for me had an undeniable ripple effect, subtly influencing how even my own family began to perceive my stargazing success, it seemed, especially when recognized by an external, influential source, was a language they understood far better than academic achievement alone. I continued to travel for my fellowship, presenting my research at international conferences, collaborating with brilliant minds, and feeling a profound sense of belonging within the global scientific community. Each trip, each successful presentation, each published paper, further solidified my sense of self, independent of familial validation. I no longer felt the need to tone down on my enthusiasm or simplify my explanations for fear of being misunderstood or dismissed. I spoke my truth, shared my passion, and found that the world, by and large, was far more receptive than my immediate family had ever led me to believe. There were still moments of bittersweet reflection. Occasionally, during a quiet evening at the observatory, surrounded by the silent majesty of the cosmos, I would think about the years of feeling invisible, of longing for a connection that seemed perpetually out of reach. There was a sadness for the lost time, for the missed opportunities for genuine understanding. But that sadness was no longer tinged with bitterness or resentment. It was a softer, more contemplative feeling, an acknowledgement of the past, but not a tether to it. I had learned that you cannot force others to see you, but you can choose to see yourself, to value your own light, and to shine it brightly regardless. One afternoon, several months later, I received an unexpected invitation. It was from Marcus. He was launching a new philanthropic arm of his company, focused on promoting STEM education for underprivileged youth. He was hosting a small, informal launch event and, to my surprise, asked if I would consider saying a few words. "You know, Elara," he said, his voice unusually hesitant, "you're actually inspiring. What you do. I never really got it before. But, seeing how someone like Pendleton respects you, and all this fellowship stuff, it's pretty amazing. Maybe you could talk to these kids about, reaching for the stars, literally." It was the closest Marcus had ever come to an apology, or at least, to an admission of his previous blindness. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I agreed to speak at his event. Standing before a group of bright-eyed, eager students, sharing my journey into astrophysics, the challenges and the immense rewards, I felt a sense of full-circle completion. I wasn't just Marcus's quiet sister, or the family enigma. I was Dr. Elara Vance, an astrophysicist, a researcher, and perhaps, to these young minds, a source of inspiration. And as I spoke, I saw my parents in the audience, watching me with an expression I had rarely seen before, a clear, unambiguous pride. It wasn't the effusive, performative pride they reserved for Marcus's business wins, but something quieter, deeper, more genuine. My journey hadn't been about forcing my family to change, though their perceptions had undeniably shifted. It had been about changing myself, my expectations, my boundaries, my understanding of my own worth. I learned that true strength isn't about silently enduring disrespect or shouldering unfair burdens. It's about recognizing your value, speaking your truth, and demanding to be treated with the dignity you deserve, even if it means disrupting uncomfortable, long-standing dynamics. Sometimes, the most profound discoveries are not those found in the distant cosmos, but those found within ourselves, and in the courageous act of reshaping our own orbits. The universe is vast, filled with mysteries and wonders, constantly evolving. So too, are human relationships. They can be complex, challenging, and sometimes painful. But like the stars, they also hold the potential for light, for connection, for transformation. My family and I may never fully understand each other's worlds, but we found a new way to coexist, a fragile peace built on a foundation of hard-won respect. And I, Elara Vance, continued to look to the stars, not as an escape, but as a reminder of the infinite possibilities that unfold when you dare to claim your own space in the universe. Elara's story is a powerful reminder that self-respect and boundary setting are essential, even within families. If her journey resonated with you, please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. You never know whose life you might touch. I still spend my nights in the quiet hum of the observatory, searching for echoes of creation. But now, I carry within me a different kind of silence, not the silence of being overlooked, but the quiet confidence of knowing who I am and what I stand for. And that, I've discovered, is a universe vast enough to hold all the stars. My path wasn't easy, and there were moments I doubted if I was doing the right thing by standing up for myself, especially against family. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. True belonging doesn't come from fitting into a mold others create for you. It comes from bravely carving out your own. What do you think? Was Elara right to finally draw the line, or should family loyalty always come first? No matter the personal cost? I'd love to read your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.